I don't know if you've gotten this before, but...
Have other people from my generation talked about it like this too?
What others probably aren't mentioning is...
I'm sure you've heard this before.
How are others answering this question?
Well, of course you've probably heard from other people.
No matter what other people try to tell you.
When you finish, I'd love to see what you have from everybody else.
You probably aren't allowed to tell me what other people said about this, right?
Defiant bodies demanding attention.
Broken bodies breaking rules.
Suspicious.
Political.
Uncomfortable.
Needy.
Inspiring.
Irrelevant.
Fragile.
Resilient.
Bodies. Citing physical and cultural barriers in our valued spaces.
Does it matter?
Yes.
No.
Well, it seems to.
Do you think so?
So I'm given this speech that she, my friend Lucinda, is supposed to give. And the woman who's the head of the organization goes up to Lucinda the next day and says, "Isn't she wonderful?" And Lucinda says, and this is when I just had a limp. And Lucinda says, "What did she mean?" Because it was clear she wasn't talking about the speech. And I said, "I know what she meant. She meant that I had a limp and I could talk." And Lucinda goes, "You're kidding." And I said, "No, that is what she meant." And she did. That I could limp and chew gum and, oh, I don't know, at the same time.
She said, "No, I don't think so. Only a couple of them mentioned it. The wheelchair. So if they're mentioning it, they're probably uncomfortable with it."
The whole language has shifted to people with disabilities, stressing people first. That's important.
I don't care if people call me crippled. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff as long as they're not stupid.
It's still no fun being marginalized, even though you get that it's just limitations of the people around you.
People can use any language they want. In our classes, we commonly call it boo-boos and cripples.
We all help each other, so it's a very positive atmosphere. It makes coming to work so much more fun.
They weren't willing to give me a computer screen that would move up and down, to adjust for my height.
If I needed help, or my baby needed help, or my wife Lisa needed help, that I would call them.
Let us know if you need our husbands to mow your lawn.
I burn wood in the wintertime. Somebody puts my wood there for me. I don't know what I'd do if they didn't. Probably wouldn't burn wood.
I can't take for granted that places will be accessible. Routes to and from places on campus.
My boss accommodates me. He says, "Do you need any help taking boxes to your car?"
The donor doesn't want automatic doors on his building.
They had one in stock. No one was really using it. It was just a demo. And they wouldn't let me have it. It was so bizarre.
Maybe they think you should hire someone yourself.
The coordinator called a bus for me. I'm not a child.
I didn't seek any kind of accommodations. I didn't think there was anything I particularly needed.
If I need a bus, I'll call and take care of it.
How can I be an academic if I can't grate cheese?
I have college students who come in each day, each morning, each night to help me out.
She said sometimes people throw out the chairs from their offices when getting new ones, and I could go look by the dumpster to see what people are getting rid of.
Getting out of bed, getting dressed, getting washed, and at night getting back into bed.
You don't want to appear needy.
I thought she was joking.
They were trying to be nice, but they just don't get it. They don't get autonomy or independence or that I'm the same person that I always was.
My husband, we went to college together, and he says he was just hitting on that cute little prom girl in the way that makes him look chivalrous. But so we met one day when I was having some issues physically in the lunch hall. He carried me to my room. I didn't need to be carried. I was walking slower because my leg was spasming, but I didn't really need to be carried. But he was cute, so I figured, why not be a damsel, It sure makes things easier, right? And so we started talking, and we talked for an hour, and we got back to my room, and we went out that weekend. That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But things went from there. I think he likes helping me and stretching my legs. I mean, technically I could do it myself. I am a physical therapist after all. I teach people how to do it themselves, but he likes helping me. He doesn't like to see me in pain, and he does like to be needed anyway. This doesn't really have anything to do with work, does it? Sorry, I don't know where I was going with this. Yeah, so as far as cripples go, I'm super gimp in a lot of ways. I mean, I have a job that's pretty physically demanding, and I'm pretty successful at it. And the only thing CP has ever really stopped me from doing is cheerleading. I always wanted to be a cheerleader in high school. I don't know why. Maybe to be pretty and popular, social standing, the football player's date, or flexible or whatever. It was something I didn't have. I mean, I wasn't ostracized or anything, but I was nowhere near there, and since I couldn't be, I wanted to be. I mean, I'm a realist. I never tried out for the squad because I can't move in sync with anyone else. I didn't because I'm a realist. I couldn't ever cheer, but I really wanted to. I always wanted to in high school. I'm not sure why. Sorry, it's kind of silly to talk about in an interview about professionalism. Let's get back to talking about work.
It's not my responsibility to educate the knucklehead in the elevator necessarily.
They need some words of hope. Hope cannot be engendered in isolation. Ever.
It's partly the disabled person's responsibility to kind of to bring that comfort level so people don't feel awkward.
If I choose to do that, great. But if not, it's not my job, man.
I guess it comes from knowing that I'd make people nervous and wanting to help with that.
I refuse to always be on.
I share authentically with them.
They say be patient, but if they're being jerks.
I've always shared very authentically my own moments of feeling abandoned by God.
My boss, the executive director, was not quite comfortable with my illness.
You need to work to make them comfortable.
Even the stuff that people think is little. Stuff that should be like a feather falling off your shoulder.
I couldn't hold a disability fist under their chin all the time.
But a ton of feathers can smother you.
People do not find this ability at all interesting. Most people would say that pretty much, of course, he deals with this ability now. He's disabled.
I do feel like I can't be as open with people I work with about what's going on with me physically because I don't ever want it to be used against me.
I think it's in part to engage conversation.
I was a real pain in the neck, but the campus always had sort of a chuckle about it. There was this one instance where I went in to teach in a classroom that I hadn't taught in before, and I was using one of those tech-enhanced podium things, and literally I couldn't see the podium. And this was supposed to be wheelchair accessible, and there was all the electronic stuff on the top of the podium, and so literally all the seats were fixed. There was nothing to stand on. So I went over and I turned over a garbage can, and I taught from the garbage can. I turned it into a theatrical moment for my students. So I requested a stool or some sort of accommodation, and I refused to go to Walmart and get one for myself. I'm going to make a request, and I'm going to force them to make this accessible to me. And they brought me all of these university-sanctioned catalogs, and I picked out a stool that was about $150 when they could have spent $10 if they wanted to go to Walmart or something. So we ordered the stool, and it didn't come until the last week of the semester. So I just said, I'm going to teach from the garbage can until I get my stool to prove a point. So every day I would walk over and turn over the garbage can, and I taught from the garbage can. And it's things like that that are really starting to irritate me. Something so simple like, I need a stool to stand on so that I can see this, had to go through so much bureaucracy that it wasn't even worth asking. And then I had to prove it. They had to go through all of these systems of approval. And my dean had offered to have one of the staff go and get me one, but I said no. I wanted to use the system. I mean, this time it was a stool, but what if it had been something important, something I needed to do my job? I was trying to prove a point. I think my point was made, but I don't think anything got any better. But I don't know. I got sick in the summer and I didn't miss any work. I feel like I have to choose between asking for disability accommodation and for parental accommodation. Like, I can't ask for both.
I'm seen as, in a sense, as sort of a slacker.
At the time, I thought returning to work while I was still sick was a badge of courage. I think it's a badge of stupidity. There are systems set up for students, but not for faculty. And if you try to use them, you're kind of more suspect. I don't know why.
But I probably get up earlier than most of them do.
I don't want to be seen as a whiner.
Myself, I cannot tolerate whiners.
I don't discuss it on the job. I don't want to seem like a whiner.
At some level, people thought that I was just whining, that I was faking it.
It just drives me up the wall.
I know that some people have to hide certain things or whatever.
I don't want to be perceived as someone who always has something going on.
I don't disclose in an interview. I don't ever. I never mention it.
But as I grow older, I could give a shit about hiding stuff.
I feel like if they knew ahead of time, they wouldn't hire me.
I mean, I can't live my life that way.
My authenticity in that regard was deeply appreciated.
When it came to other individuals, I realized they could help me, and that really changed my mindset.
He said, "You didn't tell us you were back injured." I ended up feeling that this guy who had been so excited to hire me had been so pleasant until I got my back surgery. I said, "What is going on?" I feel, I don't know. There's this whole different interaction I don't understand. And his response was, "I feel like it's clear to me that you are fundamentally dishonest because you did not disclose who you were when you applied for the job." Now, you may or may not know, but I have 30 days to file a formal complaint against him, accusing him of violating my rights. My right to not disclose a disability, sexual orientation, religion, whatever, right? I went to the top school of climate change and environmental science. NASA gave 50 awards one year to grad students working on global change. 25 of them went to my school, our school's students. Okay, so I was in that group. I got one.
I don't know how often my disability has been a factor, but I suspect it's been a factor more often than I'd like to admit.
I'm published 2.5 times more than needed papers to get tenure, and I didn't get tenure.
If I ever need to get my knee replaced, I don't know what I'll do.
They didn't want me to leave, but I couldn't. I couldn't breathe.
I was so afraid of getting denied accommodations.
If I can take that much time off.
Luckily, I was within the university. It's kind of like having a suitcase. My accommodations come with me wherever I am.
I had to retire.
Pained, swollen,
Limping,
Wheezing.
coughing, paralyzed,
constricted,
Blurred.
fatigued,
at peace.
Lonely.
loved. Uncomfortable reminders of the vulnerability of human embodiment.
We cannot escape that which allows us to be who we are.
Can we?
Should we want to?
When I had a stroke, it was dramatic and sudden.
I was young.
I was textbook. It was my knees, my hips, my elbows, just everywhere. My face, my eyes, you know?
It's just, it affects you emotionally as much as physically.
Everywhere there's joint tissue or synovial fluid. the bridge of my nose where the cartilage and bone meet, just everywhere. I couldn't walk.
I took it bad.
The depression? Yeah, I went through a year and a half.
You feel as if your whole world has been changed.
I was 5 weeks running, and it was a month before I was leaving. I already gave him notice. He called me up, and he told me he wanted me to lay off 21 people, and he wanted me to do it on a Wednesday. I said, "Why Wednesday, Marty? Why would you want to lay them off on a Wednesday? We never lay off before Friday." And he says to me, well, he says, "If we lay them off on a Wednesday, see, Thursday is the first of the month. So if we lay them off on a Wednesday, we don't have to pay for their insurance for the next month." So I went home. I thought about it and thought about it. And it drove me crazy. Thinking about those people losing their insurance and everything. If we could just keep them on till Friday, at least they'd have another month of insurance. So I went back in. And the next morning, I had all the supervisors get me a list of who could make up that 21 people. Of course, this was Tuesday morning, and I thought about it again Tuesday night. Went in Wednesday morning, called all the supervisors up the office, sat them down in the conference room, and I told them, I said, "We weren't going to lay anybody off before Friday, and that's all there was to it." I said, "If we are going out as a company, and I'm going out as a manager, a plant manager, I sure am going to walk out of here without feeling like I give anybody a royal hosing." So I didn't do it. And when my boss, the vice president, was about 35 years old, and I was 61 years old, I had kids older than him. And he come in, and he starts chewing me out, rambling and raising and whatnot. And he says, "Well, I'd fire you, except, why, what's the point? I'd have to give you severance if I fired you. I might as well let you just work out until you leave on your own." So him and I never really got along anyway, because of his attitude toward people. So I guess at least I was able to save those 25 people, 21 people, from losing their insurance that extra month. So I felt like I was going out on a good note. So I guess it was worth getting chewed out after all. I still worry about him sometimes. At my early retirement party, everyone got real emotional. One woman who came up to me, and she was always a complainer, she came up to me and she said, "Who's going to take care of us now?" I don't know who will. I try not to think about it.
It's amusing to see how people just cleared away from me.
Why do I have to be so polite?
I found out who my 3 or 4 real friends were who kept in touch.
I have to be nice to everybody or they won't be my friend.
I've always shared very authentically my own moments of feeling abandoned by God.
I kept thinking that if a truck could just hit me, everything would be okay.
I want to live to at least 80.
The chair is a tool that allows me the freedom to get around.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
You know, nothing's gonna hold me back, so yeah.
It still remains the struggle in the clutch.
Part of me knew that things were gonna get better, that I wasn't gonna always feel like this.
So little issues like getting a pimple on your stump, and you have to put pressure on it to walk, it becomes a very painful thing. Or an ingrown hair.
It's not gonna stop me.
I don't like to be regarded as a person with a disability.
So I told her, maybe things will be different by the time this happens to you.
There's a period of time where I wanted to reject my identity and be known for expertise in film and pop music and the things that I write about.
You should have seen her face. She was horrified at the idea that it could happen to her.
For me, I don't think there's such a thing called disability. It's a category, a rhetorical category that's vague.
But now as I'm in my 30s, I'm beginning to see that I can't do that. I'm ignoring something.
That really got her.
People ask me if I would ever want to just be healed, and I don't think so. I think identity and memory, if you take away an indicator of your experience, maybe you're not going to take away memory. But it seems to me the reality of walking would work as a sort of phenomenological amnesia, Like that you would forget, Like I had this dog, an amazing service dog. And he lived with me for 14 years. He died. It was terrible, my life was, I was dark and I was sad. But then I got 2 more dogs. And I can barely remember what that first dog looked like, I can barely remember what he smells like, how it felt to walk with him. And so losing your experience has a real way of erasing where you come from,
Disabled people can do anything they want.
And I can't wear my hair long again.
I tried to keep up with sailing, keep up with skiing after the accident.
I can't wear cute shoes.
I live vicariously through other people.
I couldn't go to any fraternity parties because none of the fraternities were accessible.
Not anymore. I gave up on that idea.
I knew I was never going to be a surgeon. To physically do that day after day, scrub in with crutches tucked under my armpits.
I'm not going to be a cross-country skier, not going to be a marathon runner, and I'm not going to be a mountain climber.
Kind of hobble in.
An older gentleman insisted that he should push me.
I was being pushed, which is something I don't like to allow.
I was getting whiplash.
And I went flying out, and I broke this leg in 4 places. I broke my knee in 3 places.
My arms don't work as well as I wish they did.
It's more difficult to carry things with crutches and all that kind of nonsense.
I have arthritis in my knees and feet.
And when I got back, I went to the hospital and found I had pneumonia in 1 lung and a kidney infection, all at the same time.
I couldn't sit. If I sat for more than 15 minutes, I couldn't stand.
And I have other, problems.
It's like my limbs are trying to eject themselves. That's the only way I can think of to describe it.
It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. It never gets better. Hopefully I won't need the oxygen tank soon.
My skin is weaker now. It's very discouraging. I love my body, and I mourn for it. In other words, when it changes, it makes me sad. Not because of the things that I can't do. Then I got out of the hospital, and I couldn't see well. I was having vision problems. And I went to the eye doctor and discovered I had a type of glaucoma and cataracts. My eyes got spots.
I wasn't supposed to survive till 12, but here I am.
I'm getting too dependent on that inhaler.
Suddenly I started having pressure sores and multiple sores. I don't know where they're coming from.
I do an annual visit to my neurologist, and I'm always asked, would you like us to scan your brain? To see how much damage has been done. And I'm like, for what?
Falling apart a little bit, So, I'm falling apart.
They say it's progressing, but I wouldn't call it progress,
I had to change my whole life.
I think the bottom line is you regulate your own life.
It doesn't matter unless you make it matter. We learn to respond to our bodies.
It's hard to concentrate if you're feeling pain or you're really fatigued.
It's like a wrestling match or something like that.
It still matters. All the acceptance in the world doesn't stop the spasming. My muscles are tight, and that hurts.
It's kind of funny.
It's not something to joke about.
It depends on how you approach something. Like I said before, be it work, be it play, be it your family, it doesn't matter.
I think that part of my denial process is just to not plummet into despair.
It certainly makes your target for attention, or unwanted attention.
I've got my hands on God, and God has his hands on me.
Treasured,
Discarded.
confused,
Inappropriate.
Insensitive.
Empathetic.
people understanding and denying difference,
Friends.
Lovers.
Rejects.
Parents.
acquaintances.
Bodies deeply connected and extremely isolated.
Is this what it means to be in community?
I think, well, I'm actually fairly tall. I'm 6'3" and have been told by many that I look like either a doctor or an attorney. So, in a sense, I am, perhaps, a bit imposing, and people tend to stand off from me. I've always been a part of a field with its own jargon, or technical vocabulary, so I tend to, well, I'm a bit of a wordsmith of a person, so I tend to be very precise when I discuss or describe things with people, and I think that can be a little standoffish as well, especially for lay people or whatever. And I think that put me out of reach. And in my niche, I connected well, but in general, I was out of reach. And with my disability, well, no pun intended, it really did put me in reach. If I want to draw a diagram on a flip chart, see, flip charts are usually mounted so that the bottom of the flip chart is about shoulder high, and my arms don't reach very high. And with a marker, I can make some scratches on the flip chart, but it doesn't necessarily translate to any communication between myself and the audience. And I think that I've become comfortable with asking for help. So I'm willing to solicit from, whatever group, whether it be from the team that I'm working with or whether it be from a group of planning board members. And I think that in doing that, especially if it's a group that I'm presenting to, so actually reaching over the chasm between me and them, us and them, it breaks down barriers. I invite one of them to come up and help me, and I don't know, it kind of puts us on the same team or something.
When you don't have a body that fits the image people perceive.
I think I'm regarded as a nice guy. A nice guy. One that's reasonably easy to talk to.
It's a perplexed look like, oh. And you know how guys can be.
I'm interesting to look at.
They're searching through their minds thinking, Granny? Granny had rheumatism.
Together, we can make it work.
The guy assumed that I was, non-communicative, where he was moving my body and sort of touching me.
I could send them a look that would wither their fucking asses.
I had no trouble being a lesbian, no trouble being a woman.
Women have a hard time getting taken seriously.
Just call me designer disabled.
No trouble with any of those other things I might wake up tomorrow to be.
And then you're disabled and you're short.
But this one almost killed me.
I had one doctor in particular tell me, that sometimes women just hurt.
Yeah, my wife really got mad and, took over and sort of back off,
I'm hot for a disabled woman. I'm definitely objectified from time to time.
There are times I wish it got me laid more.
That's a victory in this study, right?
I have two kids who are 6 and 9.
You hear it all the time. People are having a baby and they say, oh, I don't care if it's a boy or a girl, as long as it's healthy.
I have a good wife, good kids, good life.
One of the reasons why I'm not having kids is I only have so much energy to work with.
It's good I had kids young. I couldn't chase after them now.
And it's like, you know what? Even if it has a disability or something, does that mean you're not going to love your child?
Now if I could only breathe.
I think probably my own kind of feelings about a relationship, being disabled, probably prevented me from getting really serious with anyone after Patrick and I broke up. It was just some aspects about being paraplegic. I couldn't quite see myself in a situation where it wasn't the white picket fence. It wasn't what I had planned, kind of a thing. And so that I never pursued, those kind of relationships because there's something in me, at least. It would be more hurtful, I guess, to disappoint someone than to not have someone in my life at all, was the way that I felt about it. Although, I think I probably could have made someone happy. I guess I was thinking that, and maybe I didn't give myself credit for being able to do as much as I really ended up being able to do. But I just felt, I wanted to go to basketball games and sit in the middle bleachers, and I didn't want, to be the person down on the floor. I didn't want to be the center of attention kind of a thing because of a special need that I might have. Although, I really do think I could have made someone happy. I could have.
I've never been asked out romantically.
She left saying, I can't stay with you. There's too much pain. Most women didn't really want to go out with me.
Of course, it was hard on my wife. It was hard on all of us.
There's too much pain here in the house. I have to get away.
If you're married or in a close relationship with someone else, they generally don't understand it all.
It could have put off, thousands and thousands of people. But the few that came through are the ones that I wanted.
I wasn't all that successful with people who were not in healthcare, to be honest with you. My disability had a lot to do with the fact that we divorced. It's not easy living with a disability, and it's even tougher in many ways living with a disabled spouse. Kara found out that she had to be up by 5:30 every morning, which was when my aides came in, and she couldn't go to sleep till 10:30 at night, which was when my aides finally left. The house had to be laid out in a certain way in order for me to maximize my independence. I used to talk about societal discrimination and how things weren't accessible to me. She left saying, I can't stay. There's too much pain. There's too much pain here in the house. I have to get away. I think if it weren't for my disability, we might still be together. I'm not sure.
How did you meet?
eBay.
eBay?
eHarmony. eBay, yeah. I bid for her.
She was a physical therapist.
I'm still married after 32 years, which is great for an individual with my disability. I always stated that right up front. I'd tell them I was disabled.
That was the one reason I was able to strike up a relationship with her.
Recently, within the last month, my wife, who is also a professional, has decided that she wants to provide all of my care.
She, my wife, has a health background.
Which is absolutely mind-boggling to me. She has cheerfully taken over all of my care.
The day she left, she said, well, I've been with you for 6 months. You're on your own. And away she went.
They weren't too happy about having a daughter-in-law that couldn't hike.
That's changing over time. It used to be 90% that ended up divorced. Now it's in the low 80s. Who's this semi-attractive woman I see you with all the time? Is she your nurse?
I think she just sort of stepped up to the plate and said, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to enjoy it.
I said, no, asshole. That's my wife.
Don't give up.
There's no shame in stepping down.
Know your limits.
Tell them how it is.
Fight for your rights.
Don't let them know.
Adapt when you can.
Can we guide one another through the borderlands of marginalized bodies?
Can we at least try?
Don't put on the persona like, I can do everything, and no, I won't show you that I'm hurting.
You don't want to appear needy.
It's okay to ask for help.
Let them know your limits. Ask for things before you need them so it doesn't look like you're asking for some other reason.
You have to know your rights and what to ask for.
If you're needy, you may not get taken seriously later.
The interviews at the medical schools, save one, were pretty discouraging. The interviewers seemed to indicate that they didn't think I could do it due to the physical situation, not due to my testing scores or my curriculum or recommendations. But this one school, the last school that I interviewed at, was kind of interesting. It's a Northeast campus, and I was interviewing on a Monday following the biggest snowstorm we had had in 20 years. I drove up 5 hours, and they had barely cleared some of the roads, and it was difficult getting there, but I got there, and when you did the interview, I seemed to hit it off with some of the physicians on the staff, and then they gave, the tour of the hospital led by a medical student, and he had a whole group of applicants with him, and I was on crutches. They were going up and down the stairs, and the guy said, well, you can use the elevator, but I went up and down the stairs too. They don't want to seem different, I guess. I think that probably mattered. I think they were probably tracking that to see if I could physically handle it. And I did well. I got to join part of a busy medical practice, and I got along with the staff quite well. I don't know what else to tell you. Was it physically difficult? Yeah, sure. It's not unusual for me to work 24 hours straight. And I was tired, and my back hurt. I used to drive some of the nurses nuts, because in the afternoon I would get a cup of coffee and 3 or 4 aspirin tablets, and I would take the aspirin and I would chew them up and swallow them down with the coffee, and it was... If there's something you really want to do, it's surprising just what you can do.
You can't just ignore your body. No one can, but especially us.
We have to be extra diligent about taking care of ourselves so that we maintain our level of function and stay out of pain.
Make sure they give you the proper cushion so you can protect your lower body.
Stay active.
And make sure you exercise and keep your limbs, as flexible as possible.
You need to educate yourself on how prosthetics are made,
Get on the right drugs.
You need to focus on you.
I've seen too many disability scholars focusing with a frenzy on their status and on their body and all this disability stuff.
I can't make you comfortable in your skin.
They get more comfortable the more you work at it.
A number of people are really angry.
You have to trust God enough to be angry with Him.
You can't hold on to that anger.
Remember, there's somebody worse off than you are.
So my way of dealing with people in the workplace is to assume that we're all nuts here.
My brain still functions completely normal.
When we go outside of the workplace, we're all different people.
Some people don't get it, and they'll never get it.
Be adaptable.
I've come to the conclusion that you get to a point where you ask yourself,
You can't adapt to stupidity, and you shouldn't feel like you have to.
do I really want a job that they don't think I should have?
I've heard people write about and talk about, I'm not really disabled, I'm just different. I'm not in that place. One of the things I try, now this is a very important thing to mention, I try to remain very alive to a tension within me. And this is the tension. I know 2 things to be true about myself. One is that I'm exactly the person I am supposed to be. I believe that I am exactly the person I am and exactly the person God wants me to be. And that's, I am exactly the person God made me to be. And it's a good thing. It's a blessed thing. The other thing I know about my life and myself is that I am not supposed to be like this. I'm not supposed to have to deal with this. And I believe that God is as angry as I am. I believe that through my journey of pain and difficulty, that my life is not sort of divinely approved. So I am who I'm supposed to be, and I am not in any way this is not the life God intended for me. Do you understand what I'm saying? You got to hold those in tension. You got to hold them in tension, and it's not schizophrenic. It's authentic.
Take it one day at a time, and remember.
Realize that it's complicated. It complicates your life in ways that people who are healthy can never understand.
Realize as you get older, it's going to be more difficult simply through the aging process.
You need to know your limits.
So if you have a good job with benefits, stay there.
It gets easier.
But by all means, if it gives meaning to your life, do it. Just do it. It's not the smartest or the most educated or the richest person with a disability. It's the one who perseveres.
Gazing,
Intrigued,
curious,
Disgusted.
Seduced.
shamed,
angered,
Do you see the other looking?
sympathetic,
amused,
flattered,
Annoyed.
Irritated.
enraged.
Now do you want to look away?
Are you hoping they'll answer your questions?
Would you be willing to answer theirs?
So, some personal stuff. But I can't wear my hair long anymore. I can't brush it. I can't blow it dry. I have to have short hair that I can run my fingers through, because if my hands are over my shoulders for just a few seconds, they start to go numb. And after about a minute, the pain sets in. And it's really complicated, because I'm in really good shape and he just doesn't understand. One thing is that I can't have my hair long, and another is that I can't wear, well, pretty women's shoes. Most people don't realize, but I can't throw off my balance. If I lean back to compensate like you do in heels, it can really make my back and neck hurt, you know? And if my shoes are too tight, like those shoes that are narrow and trendy and girly that everyone wears, I can't be uncomfortable, because added to the pain, it's just too much. So I have these shoes. They're called Born. And they're these cute little loafer-looking shoes. And I wear them all the time, even when I go out, because they're comfortable and they have a lot of support. And they're really helpful. Well, they help, like, with my knees. Well, they help by keeping me comfortable. Anyway, so I'm with this guy, and we've been together a while. And out of nowhere, it was just a few weeks ago, he goes, "Why do you wear those shoes all the time? If I got you some shoes that weren't ugly, would you stop wearing those?" And I said, "Listen, these are not cheap shoes. These are expensive shoes." Well, I mean, I got them at TJ Maxx, but they're an expensive brand. And I tried to tell him that I can't wear just any shoes. I need good shoes. Even before all this happened, before I started having trouble at work, I needed good shoes. I was pigeon-toed as a kid. Well, not that that matters. It's about my needs now. But he just wouldn't let it go. He went on and on about it. He kept saying I liked wearing old lady shoes. And I'm 5.5 years older than him, so my age comes up. It's ridiculous, isn't it? You would think having a disability, whether or not you could wear your hair long or wear pretty shoes, wouldn't be an issue, but it is.
People were always watching.
Polio gives a visible effect.
I don't like to be the center of attention, especially in a crowd.
I noticed people stared at my walk here.
Scooter user people don't really notice. I'm always going to be a little bit different.
You're a belly button level for everyone, and you really stand out in a crowd.
I'm something to look at.
People notice me.
And that's one thing for me that is perhaps a bit disconcerting at times.
I'm kind of nice to look at.
On one hand, they're awakened to my presence.
The crutches were definitely unsettling.
There's a visible effect, so you can't absolutely ignore it. They're like... Now, I don't know if you can describe that look.
Not just look, but turn their head and follow in that stupid, ignorant kind of way.
I mean, sexuality is a very loaded thing, particularly for disabled people. I think in a lot of ways because it's such a fundamental part in how we come to acknowledge and validate ourselves and how we come to find value within culture. One of the first times Nicole and I had sex, I had her take my brace off, and it was very, so what was its symbolic significance? Well, it was very significant for me, and I think for her too. In a way, it symbolized a level of acceptance. If we were going to go to this next level and take this next step, this is something that has to be. Something that we have to, that you have to come to terms with and accept. And I had to accept that in a lot of ways, and she might have already, but I never really did that. It was very significant for sure. I think in a lot of ways I was looking for this tall, beautiful blonde to validate my existence somehow. I know that's something I came into this relationship wanting and needing and expecting, which is... that's a lot of freight to pile onto something as fragile as two human beings trying to spend time together and make a life together, you know?
To see if I could do it.
There are coming from the tragedy model.
They realize you must not be able to walk.
A lot of students feel bad when they see me.
Her dad just wouldn't acknowledge it. He didn't want people to see her and have a label for why she moved the way she did.
When we get on an airplane or off an airplane, everybody automatically assumes that we're going to need a wheelchair.
Or they think you're using it because you're lazy.
Sometimes they think I'm the TA, not the professor. I don't have any speech impairments, physically or mentally, with my language use. When I start talking, their face does this.
And we don't use a wheelchair when we're at an airport.
I've had people say that I'm lazy because I'm always sitting around.
They're realizing I'm not dumb or limited or whatever.
I'm in pain, but people couldn't see that.
I was pale. One day my tongue wasn't working. The muscle just wasn't working.
At some level, people thought that I was just whining, that I was faking it.
So there were things, actual physical things that people could see and recognize happening.
People wonder why I walk like I do and make up their own stories of why.
I think that people think that they deserve an explanation. Do you know what I'm saying?
It's one of those forms of disability that you can't leave as totally neutral.
There's less questioning when you're using a scooter.
There's an expectation of blurring public and private because they don't know how I take a leak. The kid, she asked, well, you can think, can't you? I've had very awkward situations where people will come out of nowhere and be like, how do you get dressed in the morning? And I was like, yeah, I can think. how do you put on your clothes? She figured out in her little mind that there was no way I was getting dressed by myself. Or how do you eat?
It's weird, some questions people will ask you in the grocery store.
Then she says, "Can you have babies?"
They don't know how I have sex. They don't know if I have sex.
I said yes, and I can have sex too.
What drew me to performance was controlling the gaze.
I was getting tired of it, so I reached down, and the type of prosthetic I wore at the time was not easy to remove, but I reached down and I pulled it off and I put it on top of my car.
I would love to just slap them.
And then I looked at him directly and I said, "Is that maybe good enough for you?" And then he looked at me, and he could tell, and he shut up.
I would love to do that someday. Just slap somebody.
Why don't you use a cane? What, are you too proud?
My partner's always afraid that I'm gonna be arrested. I probably will be.
If you're gonna be rude, I'm gonna be rude back.
When I was in grade school, I could stare down anybody. I could just tell when people were staring at me, and I would turn and fix them with this gaze that would wither their fucking asses. And they would turn and slink away with their tail between their legs. I could do that, you know, and that's how I would respond. I don't know if this is a growing comfort with myself or a growing maturity and with the world, but after, I mean, I just got to where I didn't really notice stuff like that anymore. I mean, you just get so used to where I didn't really notice stuff like that anymore. I mean, you just get so used to it, I seldom even notice it. It's just, it's kind of one of those things that happens, and sure, people are more covert about staring, but I'm something to look at. And one of the things that's been kind of nice to recognize is that at times, I'm kind of nice to look at, and I recognize at least some of the time that I'm turning heads, and I suspect that some of it is, I don't know, the way I have my jacket over my shoulders or the way I have my hat on, but I'm interesting to look at, and that's okay.
I was on TV and I was kind of vain about my puffy face.
I think they're more attentive to me.
If you're gonna look at me, I'm gonna give you something to look at.
I'm self-conscious about the way I walk.
I was always sort of a big mouth and craved attention, you know?
It gave me a way to manage how I was looked at, you know?
I'm very self-conscious about things like drooling, drinking with a straw.
You wanna look at me? You wanna look at me. Don't look at me because I walk this way.
My entire face on one side was paralyzed, so I was very self-conscious.
Okay, you're gonna look at this. You can look at that, but you're gonna look at this too.
I think had I not gone out in public so quickly, I wouldn't have gotten these horrified responses.
You're gonna look at this too.
The whole helpless thing can be sexy. My sister jokes about it, and now I guess I'm joking about it.
I mean, people see I can scurry along in my wheelchair faster than most people, you know? In that sense, I'm still boyish.
Do you ever feel that way with all the gays? People couldn't see that.
People were always watching.
People wonder.
They can see.
They just see me.
People see.
People stared.
You really stand out.
You can't absolutely ignore it. That look.
I'm gonna give you something to look at.
They're awakened.
I mean it. You're gonna look at this too.
People could see.
This is a very complicated discussion.